What's going on, Notre Dame fans? Mike Singer, blueandgold.com. With me today, On3 Director of Scouting and Rankings, Charles Power. We're going to do a 3-part series here, so make sure you check out the videos in the ensuing days here. So Charles, again, On3 Director of Scouting and Rankings, you pretty much have a thankless job. I mean, either you're ranking kids way too low, or, well, of course they should be ranked exactly right there, if not higher.
Yeah.
So, like I said, thankless job. Just tell me about the process and even the difficulty in your position ranking kids, your strategy and outlook on some of these things. Like, you kind of take this
Yeah.
wherever you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes I feel like a little bit like a referee, putting these things together because it's like you said, it's I think people can tend to focus on like the negatives, but I mean that's not really how we approach it. Like first off, like our first goal is to really kind of target prospects we think have like the most long-term upside. So we're looking heavily at NFL draft. I think that metric is probably the best way to judge who the best college football players are. It's the one time that in a college football player or a football player's career, other than a recruiting ranking, where they're kind of like quantitatively judged against each other. So that's an important metric for us, or just kind of a a baseline, kind of what we look for. So we're looking for, like with quarterbacks, we're trying to target quarterbacks we think could be first rounders at the top of our rankings. Top 10 first round picks. And I think if you look at, the recent recruiting rankings and kind of how they reflect in the NFL draft, I think just generally speaking, like the industry is doing a better job with that. I think there was like nine first rounders out of like the 32 5 stars in the 2019 cycle already. So, and that was definitely like a pretty crazy cycle. It was a boom bust. There's a lot of guys who haven't materialized, but the ones who hit pretty big, like Kyle Hamilton being a good example of that. But yeah, I mean, so we kind of approach it from that perspective. That's kind of what we go for in terms of like what we weigh. I think it starts off for us with each position. That's where you're comparing apples to apples. So we're going to go through and order all the quarterbacks, all the running backs, all the receivers. And to do that, we look at a lot of different stuff. We kind of have like critical factors. We look at, height, weight, speed, measurables. I'm big on like arm length, stuff like that. Then how they play obviously is the number one factor, like how they play on Friday nights. I think people can kind of lose track of that, especially into their senior year. I mean, to me, that's probably the biggest, inefficiency in recruiting, is a lot of times, colleges, they have to take these prospects early, kind of make their evaluations early when they're 10th, 11th grade, decide, build their board, start recruiting them. A lot of times nowadays, their recruitment's over by their senior year. They're taking, official visits in June. So for us, we kind of have an advantage to where we can stretch that evaluation out all the way until January. So a big deal for us is the senior year, how they play, how they look and play in all-star games. So that's kind of all to say it's very fluid. Like, I think one thing that is maybe differs us from other, outlets that do rankings is like we'll make moves and be fluid with it, because it's just like it's a moving target. Like, it's a very fluid process, maybe even compared to like the NFL draft. When they do these big boards, they're all that information is like their season's over, but we're doing it live while they're playing football over sophomore,
Right.
junior, senior year. So it's a moving target. So I think the only way you can really do that to me and be like honest about it is to like be open to change and being as fluid as possible.
So from a Notre Dame perspective, can we just set the record straight, Charles? You do not hate Notre Dame.
No, I don't.
Okay, well, with that out of the way, it doesn't get much bigger for Notre Dame than Dante Moore, on 3 consensus as most 5-star player, number 4 quarterback. And I've talked to you a lot about this, Charles. Like, fans kind of get very focused in on the national ranking,
Yeah.
but you guys focus a lot more on the position ranking. So the consensus, and we can pull up his industry comparison. I mean, he's as high as the number 3 quarterback, on 3 as low as the number 5. So, I mean, that's really splitting hairs in such a strong quarterback class. But when he does drop from number 4 quarterback to number 5 in your rankings, there's a lot of national spots that come with that, but
Right.
it's really not that big of a drop as you've explained to me. So, you want to discuss Dante's ranking? Of course, this is Notre Dame's number one quarterback target, arguably biggest recruit for Notre Dame in some time. Tell me about Dante's ranking, number five quarterback again in a loaded class, and then just what you see on his tape.
Yeah, so it's a really strong quarterback class at the top. I mean, I think we there's three in the top five overall. I think the guy who's number four, Chris Vizina, is like 19-20 range. Dante Moore comes in at 40, within the top 50. And after him too, there's a couple guys after him. I think that could make an upward move. So I think to start off, Dante Moore, like I would when I was at 24/7 and put together the initial ranking for the 23 cycle when we did that, and we had Dante. I think he was top 20. I think he was maybe between 10 and 20 when we did that initial one. I think the thing that sticks out about him, first off, just dating back to when he was a freshman, is like he has a really quick release. He's a natural thrower of the ball. Just I'd say outside of Arch Manning, probably has the second fastest release of the top quarterbacks, in the class. Um, Always been very productive. He had a great junior season at MLK. I think if you look at the efficiency numbers, his yards per attempt and accuracy and all of that is as good as anybody in the class. So he's a guy who I think just from a passing perspective stacks up really well. And I will say, Mike, too, this initial ranking that we did off of him when we kind of adjusted it, this was based off junior season. We're looking at a lot of physical stuff, like mobility, upside, all that kind of thing. So, and since we've done that, like Dante's had a really good offseason, just based off what I've seen. I watched all of his reps at the Elite 11 regional. His Elite 11 workout was one of the better ones I've seen so far among the top quarterbacks. So he's playing really well. Like he's continuing to show a lot of the stuff we like about him just based on since he was a freshman sophomore. Um, I think the biggest thing with Dante Moore and for me at least, or for our rankings, is just kind of getting a gauge for kind of what his upside is, in terms of mobility, athleticism. I think if you were going to pick one thing that the guys that are ranked ahead of him do better than him in a game setting, it's probably just movement. And I think when you look at a lot of the top NFL quarterbacks now, or the guys who are getting drafted highly, that's something that really matters. It's just kind of a baseline. Like I think the majority of the first round quarterbacks, those guys are running for 10 plus touchdowns as high school seniors. And so I think that's something I would just, it's not to say that we don't think Dante Moore can do that. It's just kind of wanting to see it. And that's just something that the others have probably shown a little more capacity to do at this stage. But as you can see kind of in this video, I mean, he is a really, really natural, fluid passer. There's really, no wasted motion, and the ball kind of pops out of his hand. And I think too, I think his arms continue to get stronger as we've watched him, continue to progress. I think he was at the recent Elite 11. I think he was like about 6'2", 6'2 and a half, about around 210. So he's kind of filling out, I'll see him in June. We'll kind of get a comparison with all these top quarterbacks. So, just kind of based on where he is right now, he's top five quarterback in a really strong class, and we'll see kind of, how that shakes out. And kind of like I said before, like we're very open to making changes and being fluid and all of that, and kind of taking what we put in. And I will say, like, one thing Dante Moore does have over the others is, several of the others ahead of him is he's really done it, on Friday nights.
Right.
You look at Arch Manning has always been pretty productive. He's kind of in a little weirder situation with his high school, the talent kind of around him. But, Nico Iamaleava is kind of a physical projection. So we'll see what he does, this year. And kind of compare. But I mean, Dante Moore has done it on Friday nights. I mean, his production is probably the best of those guys.
So for this first video here, I wanted to talk about just two of the most important targets, or recruits, I should say, for Notre Dame in the 2023 class. Dante Moore, obviously, Notre Dame really wants to have him in their 2023 class. And then you look at a guy like Keon Keeley, who's been committed to Notre Dame since last June, and seemed like a high upside guy. But where does he rank? When they come out. On 3 was, I mean, right away. I mean, you guys had him as a 5-star prospect, and you can see that he's, I mean, a top 25 player across the board. You guys have him as the number 3 player in the country in this cycle. And like you said, the top was it Malachi Nelson, Arch Manning, number 1 and 2 players in the country, and so Keeley, the number 1 non-ranked quarterback in the country. So what makes Keon Keeley, such a highly ranked prospect in your eyes?
Yeah, so generally speaking, when you look at the top of our rankings, it's going to oftentimes be premium positions are going to be the guys who kind of load up in the top 10, 15, and Keeley as a edge, as a pass rusher, certainly is one of those. I think, the thing that jumped out with him is like you said, Mike. I mean, we had him pretty high to start, and I think as we continue to see through his junior year, like his initial ranking was just based off like the physical upside, just kind of the stature, the athleticism. Has a basketball background, good length, and but I think as we saw his junior year, I mean, like he was just like a dominant player. Like the light switch flipped, and I think he had like 8 sacks in his first 3 games or something like that, and he was just a really dominant high school player on Friday nights, which is really encouraging to see for a high, what we kind of view as a high upside pass rusher to be that productive on a consistent basis, as a junior, while also still kind of having that tangible physical upside, is pretty awesome. I mean, he finished his junior year with 34 tackles for loss and 16 and a half sacks. So, and I watched several of his games. We everybody kind of saw the one on national TV against Arch Manning where he was, the best player in that game. I would say. I mean, Berkeley's running back was really good, but I mean, he was the most impactful in terms of just disrupting what Arch Manning's team was trying to do. And you can kind of see here too. I think one thing that separates Keeley maybe from some of the other top edges right now is his ability to bend around the edge. You can kind of see how he can dip. He's just a very flexible athlete, and you may be comparing to some of the others who are just kind of more like power speed rushers and kind of have one-dimensional games. Like Keeley, I think, has shown kind of an ability. You can see it right there, like the dip, and he's a taller guy at maybe close to 6'6", but he can get on the same level with these shorter high school offensive tackles. So seeing that kind of nuanced skill for such like a like a high upside athletic prospect is really encouraging. I think I did like some player comparisons for 5-star prospects, and mine for Keeley was Kayvon Thibodeau, just kind of what he reminds me of a little bit. He's actually, I mean, he's bigger than Thibodeau and maybe slightly longer at the same stage, but just kind of for a high cut edge, he kind of has that ability to bend and dip, and is really productive like Thibodeau was at the high school level as well. So yeah, man, I mean, Keeley, I'm gonna try to maybe go see him in person at some point this offseason just to kind of eyeball him. But yeah, I feel pretty good about having him as our number 1 non-quarterback at this stage, just kind of based off the skill set and upside he's shown.
So Charles, the key to modern day football right now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you got to have a darn good quarterback, and you got to go get the other team's darn good quarterback. You got to go sack them. So you got Dante Moore, he's a pretty good passer, and then you got Keon Keeley, who, like you just talked about, I mean, your best edge rusher in the 2023 class. I mean, do you see these two guys being key pieces to potentially bringing Notre Dame finally a national championship?
Yeah, I mean, these are the recruits you have to get if you want to make an impact in the college football playoff. And Notre Dame fans have kind of seen, Notre Dame's made the playoff twice and made the national championship, the BCS, with Brian Kelly another time before. And you kind of see when you get to that level, it's almost like the matchups that these elite players can create are really kind of what win you those games. Having that guy that can just completely control a game on the defensive front is pivotal. We've seen some of these top, defensive ends, defensive tackles really kind of dominate those games. And I think too, I mean, I'm sure Mike will get into this in other videos too, but like I think quarterback is the biggest area for Notre Dame to take a jump, and having a guy like Dante Moore, who we expect to, like, I mean, I think Dante Moore is going to be a really good college quarterback. I think everybody expects that. So having a guy like that could really be a game changer for Notre Dame. He would be as highly touted, a quarterback prospect coming in that I think they would have signed in a while.
All right, good stuff there from Charles Power. Make sure you guys hit the thumbs up on this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you have not yet, and make sure you stay tuned for our second and third videos here in the coming days. Appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you next time.